SEGA Genesis, my favorite console of all time. I love the SEGA Genesis so much. I have so many gaming memories growing up playing the SEGA Genesis, having a good time, and there's just so many great games on the SEGA Genesis. It's my all-time favorite console. That should come as no surprise to some of you who have been watching this channel for a while. The SEGA Genesis is one of gaming's all-time best consoles. And Sega, I don't think Sega really ever lived up to the SEGA Genesis after the console died. The Saturn is good. I like the Saturn a lot. And the Dreamcast is really good too, but I don't know, there's just something about the SEGA Genesis. I really love this console. And some of you may be interested in getting into playing Genesis games, but maybe don't want to go out and buy a console. Maybe you just want to have a way to play some of the games, try them out, and maybe test the waters. And a good way of doing that is with this guy. The SEGA Genesis Classics on the PlayStation 4. You get over 50 SEGA Genesis games. That's a good deal. I mean, there's a lot of really good games on this collection. Games like Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Phantasy Star 1, 2, and 3, Streets of Rage, Shining Force. There's really quality games that makes, you know, this $30 package well worth it just for a few of those names alone. But there's a lot of games on this collection. For me to go over every single game that's on this collection would take me a while. It would be a really long video. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to go in parts. This is going to be a series. Am I going to do them in order? No. The next video after this one will not be another SEGA Genesis Classics video, but this is Volume 1. I'm going to show off 5 games and talk about them, and really give you a taste of those 5 games for this first episode, and then in later episodes I'll show off more. The 5 games are pretty much picked at random. They're just games that I felt like playing at the time. I will eventually get through them all, but let's start off with a little game known as Fatal Labyrinth.
We start off our showcase here today with a little game called Fatal Labyrinth. Fatal Labyrinth is pretty interesting because it is a RPG top-down dungeon crawling roguelike game. Pretty cool. It's a pretty cool game. You play as a guy who has to go through the Fatal Labyrinth. It's in the name of the game. You start out in a little village and everybody talks about this ancient hero that once slayed this dragon up in the labyrinth. And now the tower has risen again, and who's going to do this? And this kid over here just doesn't want to go to school the next day. Which is relatable. I wouldn't want to go to school either if there was a giant evil tower in the middle of my village. So you go into the Fatal Labyrinth. It's a pretty cool top-down game, kind of simple for today's standards. You can open up an inventory menu, and once you pick up items throughout the labyrinth, you can equip them. But battling kind of happens by itself. You just have to face the enemy and push in that direction and you'll automatically battle. It's all stat based, so it's all really dependent on what kind of gear you have, and the gear is dropped at random. So this is really going to be where you either do or don't like the game, because sometimes you get really good gear from the start of the game and sometimes you get really crappy gear. It just kind of happens. It's just one way or the other. So, you know, the game really is randomized. You never know what you're going to get when you start playing Fatal Labyrinth. So I know a lot of newer games borrow this roguelike structure, and people seem to like that. I mean, I do. I know I like games like Crypt of the Necrodancer and Binding of Isaac, and that's kind of what this game like reminds me of. It's a bit slower than those games, less gimmicky, but it's still a really fun time. Fatal Labyrinth is one of those games that I think is kind of underrated on the SEGA Genesis. I can sit down and play this game for a while. Next up, we have Sonic Spinball. I knew I wanted to talk about a Sonic game in the first episode, but I thought coming out the gate with something like Sonic 1 or Sonic 2 might have been a little too obvious, so I wanted to try something a little different with this one, and I wanted to play Sonic Spinball. Sonic Spinball is a game that I used to play a lot when I was younger, but I haven't really touched it in a while. I wasn't sure if this game would really hold up as well as my memory serves it, and I'll be honest, it really doesn't. It's not really that great of a pinball game. There are better pinball games. Heck, even on the Genesis, there's better pinball games. I think Dragon's Revenge is probably a better pinball game. But I don't know. There's a certain charm to this game. You play as Sonic. You're stuck in this evil pinball land, like that. It's in Eggman's base, I guess. That's what the opening cutscene kind of implies. I don't know. I mean, I could read the manual, but I don't really care. It's a Sonic pinball game. You kind of semi-control Sonic. You can kind of influence his direction in the air. But it's really all about pinball. Each table has their own set goals. Like the first table, you just need to open the pathways to get to the 3 different emeralds and then beat the boss. And like I said, where it's a pinball game, it's kind of hard to really influence your direction unless you're just really good at pinball. And even at that, the physics are still SEGA Genesis pinball physics, so they're not the most realistic physics in the world. Like I said, I don't know. There's a certain charm to this game. There's a certain charm to this game that I really like. I think the music, for the most part, is really good. For the most part, the options menu has awful music, but the actual in-game music is really fun. I really like the kind of darker tone that this game has for some reason. A lot of the areas in this game look really sinister, which makes sense because we're in Dr. Robotnik's base. And something always kind of cracked me up about Sonic's model in this game. It looks kind of off. You can tell that it's by a different team. It's not by Sonic Team, so it looks a little janky, but Sonic Spinball is still a fun game. It's a fun game that is pretty easy to get into. I don't think it holds up as well as my memory serves, but it's a cool addition here, and it's something you can just waste 30 minutes on if you're just looking for something to play. Next up, we have a really cool one here, Wonder Boy 3. Wonder Boy 3, well, just the Wonder Boy series in general, I think, is kind of overlooked. In recent memory, there have been a few remakes of like the first Wonder Boy and Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap. They've gotten digital remakes on like the PS4 and stuff, but overall, Wonder Boy is still one of those Sega series that I think goes way overlooked. The Wonder Boy series is awesome. This collection also has Wonder Boy and Monsterland, but Wonder Boy 3 is pretty notable for being a little different than the other game. This game is more akin to the first Wonder Boy. It's a auto-scrolling platformer shooter, I guess you would call it. As you play along with the game auto-scrolls, you platform and you shoot enemies. I wouldn't really call it a shoot 'em up, like a shoot 'em up, but also wouldn't call it a platformer. It's kind of like a hybrid. It feels really arcadey, but it's very fun, especially in co-op. This game is great in co-op, but it's just, I don't know. There's just a lot of charm in this game. Something about the visuals reminds me of like a Taito branded arcade game, something like Bubble Bobble. I don't know if anybody else gets that vibe from this game, but it reminds me of something like Bubble Bobble. But Wonder Boy 3, I think, is still a really fun game. As you play along, you must keep collecting fruit to keep your health up. You must keep collecting power-ups to get different power-ups to your I wouldn't say gun. You don't really use a gun. You kind of shoot things out of a sword, but to get different power-ups to your sword laser thing. It's Wonder Boy. Once again, I think Wonder Boy is a really underrated franchise. There's way better games. I really did I wish Wonder Boy 4 was on here. That was a Japanese exclusive, but it's been released outside of Japan in recent years on the Wii Virtual Console and on the PS3 and Xbox 360. You could download it. I have it on my PS3. I was kind of hoping that game would make its way onto this collection. And it didn't. And in terms of side-scrolling shooters, there's really not a whole lot on this collection. There's a lot of shoot-'em-ups, but just side-scrolling shooters, especially spaceship shooters, this is kind of in the same vein, I guess. Sega really could have used a lot more of those in this collection. You have a few games, but Sega owns the Thunder Force series now. And I don't really get why they didn't put the Thunder Force games on this collection. But Wonder Boy 3 can probably help you scratch that itch. There's even levels where you ride a little pterodactyl and you shoot enemies like that. This game is a lot of fun, especially if you like arcade shoot-'em-up games. Next up, we have Gunstar Heroes. I couldn't talk about this collection without at least showing off one game by Treasure. And why not show off probably the most popular game on the Sega Genesis by Treasure, Gunstar Heroes. There are quite a few Treasure games on this collection. Some of them you probably haven't heard of, but Gunstar Heroes, you've probably maybe heard of this one if you're familiar with the Sega Genesis. It's a lot like, say, Metal Slug or Contra, but I actually find this game to be a lot more fast-paced than those games and a lot more fun. This game is really, really, really fun. Treasure, they're really good at their craft. They really know what they're doing whenever it comes to these shoot-'em-up style games. Probably not my favorite Treasure games. I think my favorite Treasure games are probably still Sin and Punishment. But Gunstar Heroes is phenomenal. I really like the 2-weapon system. You can pick up 2 different types of weapons at once, and it kind of mixes them together to have different outcomes. My favorite will always be the homing, the homing weapon along with the laser weapon. I think that combination is probably the one that I use the most. It's the one that I'm using in this video. It just locks onto the enemy, and I don't think it's as powerful as other weapons, but it's just a lot more useful because it just drains their health, and it allows you to focus on your dodging. This game has a lot of cool set pieces, a lot of really fun set pieces in this game. I think this game is, I wouldn't say a hidden gem, but it's a treasure. Ha ha ha! It's a treasure. I think this game... that was stupid, I'm sorry. I think this game is really good. And Gunstar Heroes is a game that you can enjoy by yourself and enjoy with a friend. It's phenomenal. Last but certainly not least, we probably have what is my favorite game I'm showing off today, Golden Axe. I mean, I have it on the background of my Turbo Zone set. I have a poster back there, Golden Axe. This game's important to me. This game is very important to me. Not just because it's a good side-scrolling beat 'em up, but because I have really early memories of this game. I have really early memories of playing this game with my dad. And my dad's not really that into video games. He played them with me a lot as a kid. But really my mom was more into playing video games, and she still is. But Golden Axe is a game that I remember playing with my dad when I was really young. And probably my first time playing a co-op style game like this, and I just hold it really close to my heart. Golden Axe, if you don't know, is a side-scrolling beat 'em up. You pick from one of 3 characters. I usually go with the girl. I think her name's, is it Tyra something? I don't remember her name. But I usually play as the girl because she has more magic that she can use, and I find that to be useful for boss fights. Golden Axe is a really tough side-scrolling beat 'em up. It's kind of primitive by today's standards. You don't really have a lot of it. You have one attack button, one jump button, and one magic button. But I still find this game to be really enjoyable. I wouldn't say it's as good as Golden Axe 2. I think Golden Axe 2 is better. And Golden Axe 3 is debatable. But Golden Axe 1, I hold this game near and dear to my heart. And it'll always be one of my favorite games of all time. It's a game that I can always return to and have a lot of fun with. And I understand that maybe if you don't have that kind of connection with this game, it's not going to be more than just something you'll play maybe with a friend. This game's definitely better with co-op. But where I do have that emotional connection to Golden Axe, I definitely find this game to be a lot more important to me than probably the average person. But Golden Axe is fun. Golden Axe is fun. It's got great music. It's got. I mean, look, you can ride little dragons. You can ride dragons. What else do you want from me? You can ride dragons.
There you have it. That was 5 games from the SEGA Genesis Classics. Fatal Labyrinth, Sonic Spinball, Wonder Boy 3, Golden Axe, and Gunstar Heroes. Next time I return, I'll do 5 different games. If you want me to cover a certain game on this collection, drop it in the comments. Let me know, and I will try to fit whatever I see into the next episode. With that said, once again, I think this is a great collection. Is it the best thing in the world? I mean, it's probably, because it's a bunch of SEGA Genesis games. But there are other SEGA Genesis collections out there, and they're probably cheaper. But this one has a lot of games that some of the other ones don't, like a lot of the treasure games. So yes, next week we will return with something a little different. That's my goal with this show now, is to do something a little different in each episode. And next episode will definitely be a little different. I'll see you guys later.
Hey geeks and gamers, TurboBot90013 here. Remember to subscribe to the Turbo Zone for more content. The Arcade Overlord, thank you. Stay retro. Turbo Zone.